My name is Darcy, and I'm one of your friendly neighborhood librarians at the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. Today, we're going to make homemade hand pies. If you picked up the kit, you should have a bag of flour, a small bag of sugar, a small bag of salt, a container of vegetable oil, some plastic wrap, some aluminum foil, and 4 packs of jelly. Now, this is a cooking demonstration, so you'll also need a fair bit of equipment from home, including a tablespoon measuring spoon, a fork or some other stirring implement, a sharp knife of some kind, a cup of water, the colder the better, a bottle or rolling pin, a large mixing bowl, and you'll also need access to an oven and hopefully an oven sheet. So the first thing we're going to do is mix together our dough. Now, this is a very basic pie dough recipe. There are lots of fancier ways to make pie dough to make it more flaky or more flavorful or just kind of more delicious in many ways, but this is an excellent starting base. So your bag of flour is pre-measured with a 1/2 cup of flour in it. So we're just going to dump that whole bag into our mixing bowl. Now, we are going to add a pinch of salt. You've got a fair bit of salt in your little salt bag, so don't dump it straight into your mixing bowl. We're going to open it up, dump it into our hand, or at least some of it, and then just put in literally a pinch worth. You can do 2 pinches if you want, but don't go crazy. Some of you guys have more salt than others in that bag. Definitely do not put in the whole bag. You do not need the rest of the salt. And now we're going to add the sugar. So this is just for flavor, to make the pie dough taste a little bit better. So I'm going to put in most of this bag, but you can decide how much you want to put in, or you don't have to put in any at all. We'll put in like that much. So that was more than half of my bag, but I've still got a little bit left over. And now I'm going to go ahead and stir up my ingredients, the dry ingredients so far. Just so that they're basically mixed. Now, we're going to add our oil. So this is also pre-measured for you. You're going to put in the whole container. If you don't get entirely the whole container, that's okay. Just drizzle it in. And now we mix. That's not too bad. You don't want to overwork it at this point, or really any point. You just want it to be pretty well combined. And this is a good spot. So now we're going to add our water. Now, you want your water to be as cold as possible. This could be ice water. You could be keeping it in the fridge. And it doesn't just have to be water if you want. My grandmother actually used to put Sprite in her pies. She thought it tasted better. It gave it a little bit of effervescent fizz when she was mixing it, which was fun, and it was sweeter, if that's something you're interested in, but water is totally good. So we are going to add in, we're going to start with 1 tablespoon of water, and you can do this by eye if you want, but if you're not familiar with baking or like really comfortable, absolutely just measure. It's totally easy. So I'm actually going to do maybe 1 and like a 1/2 tablespoons of water, and now we're going to mix it. And so you'll notice we're starting to get some big clumps, but it's not really coming together. And this is almost certainly a factor of the fork. So I have clean hands. If you're willing to do this at home with your hands, please make sure they're clean before you get in there. But once it gets to this stage, you really kind of need to work it with your fingers because you want to make sure it's going to smush up into a nice dough, right? So we would not have done that with a fork. We're just going to kind of make sure everybody smushes together a little bit. We're not going to knead it or anything. We don't need to do that. But we just want it all to come together nicely as a nice little lump of dough. And that is your pie dough right there. That is all it takes to make some good pie dough. So now we're going to move on to rolling it. With a traditional pie dough made out of butter or something, you would definitely want to chill at this point. Let your pie dough rest for a little while in the fridge. but we're gonna skip that. I find this pie dough rolls easier if you do it immediately. So we're gonna leave it in our bowl. And this counter was very clean when I started mixing things, but now I've got a little bit of a mess. So what I like to do for rolling out pie dough is have a double layer. If you have plastic wrap at home, it works well with that. But what I'm gonna do is lay out my aluminum foil piece, and then I'm gonna take my dough, and I'm actually gonna kind of squish it into a log. It doesn't need to be round, we're not making an actual pie here, but we're gonna squish it a little bit into shape, just like so. And now I'm gonna cover the top of this with my piece of plastic wrap. So this way I can roll out my dough easily. It's trapped between these two layers and it's not gonna make a huge mess as I'm rolling it. I also don't have to flour any surfaces, which is nice. This dough is kind of sticky, so it's kind of easier to do it this way. So I'm gonna take my rolling pin. In this case, it is just an empty bottle of grape juice. And I'm gonna roll this out pretty thin, but I'm going for a kind of rectangle shape. So this is my sheet of pie dough rolled out pretty thin. It's not crazy thin. A couple of things to note when you're rolling is that it's going to kind of squinch to the edges. As it kind of builds up there, you can just set your pin down right on the edge and roll inward, and that will disperse that little buildup of dough. Another thing to note, if you're using this kind of double layer method to roll out your dough, is that the plastic wrap sometimes will get folded over on itself and with a piece of dough in there. So just make sure that your plastic wrap is staying flat over the top and not getting rolled into your actual sheet of dough. That would not be good. And if you get any little tears or anything, that'll happen along the edges. It's not a big deal. This dough is pretty forgiving. You can kind of just push a piece of that's stuck out a little bit further on top of it and smush it down. It'll be fine. So now that we've rolled out our dough, we're just gonna lift off this top piece of plastic wrap and we're ready to work with it. So this amount of dough will make 2 nicely sized hand pies. You could make 4 tiny ones if you wanted, but you don't want to go too small because you need to make sure you've got enough dough on your edges that you can fold over and crimp. So we're gonna take our sharp knife and I'm just gonna cut this one down the middle. And if you wanted to, you could actually just cut the aluminum foil in half, but I don't want to scratch up this table. So we're going to leave it as so. And now we are going to get our jelly and our mixing forks again. This jelly is already quite sweet, so it's going to be our filling for our little hand pies. We're going to put 2 containers of jelly on each hand pie. And the way these are going to work is that we're going to put the filling on the top here, avoiding the edges, and then we'll fold over this side. So these are going to be folded in half again. So to get this jelly out, I'm just going to kind of scrape it up a little bit. I don't really want it in one big gloop. Just mix it up and then plop it down. And we'll get the other one on there too. Okay, so now we've got our little pile of jelly, but we're gonna spread it out a little bit just so that it's a little bit more even. There we go. So we'll do the other side and then I'll show you how to fold. All right, now that our jelly is in place, we are gonna fold. So the easiest way I've found to do this is just take your aluminum foil, or if you have another sheet of plastic wrap on the bottom, that's fine too. And we're just gonna flip it over the top and then gently peel it away. And if you realize as you start peeling away that you didn't flip it enough, just kind of scoosh it up. Scoosh it up a little bit. Ta-da! 2 weird little pie tacos. So, and once your pie crust is off, you can kind of zhuzh it a little bit more. But I think this is going to be okay. All right, and from here, we're going to get our mixing fork again, or a clean fork. And you're going to crimp down the edges all around, and you really want to press in and pull out. So this is going to seal the edges of your pastry so that the jelly doesn't just run out the sides as it gets hot. We'll come back and do the middle in a minute. You also can roll them over if you want instead of pressing and pressing out. It's a little bit more reliable if you roll them over, but it also makes a much thicker edge of crust that doesn't have any nice filling in it. So it's up to you, whatever you think looks better. You can trim off these edges if you like, the kind of scraggly looking bits on the sides, but I think it's fine. It's a rustic hand pie. Okay, so we don't have to do this edge because that's the edge we flipped on, but we do have to do the cut edge. So that's all of our edges pressed in. Now we're going to trim the middle, but before that, this is your reminder to go set your oven or your toaster oven to 350 degrees. It needs to preheat for a little while. We probably should have done it right when we first got started, but I forgot, as I often do in baking. So let's go do that now. Okay, now that our ovens are preheated, or preheating, we are going to take the last step we need to do on those little pie bits, where we can trim. We'll go ahead and trim the edges off one of these, just so you can see how tidy it can look. And now we need to create some steam holes. This is the real reason you need a sharp knife. So you can just cut some little lines in these guys at the top if you want. You only want to go through the top layer of dough. And that'll be perfectly fine. Or you can cut a design in it if you want. See how it turns out. Okay. So now I'm actually going to clean up the extra dough off of this piece of aluminum foil because we're just going to bake them on this sheet of aluminum foil. Now, you don't have to bake them on this if you don't want to. You can always gently lift them off the aluminum foil the rest of the way and put them straight on a baking sheet. That is totally okay. There's one extra step you can take if you have the supplies at home. They're perishable, so I couldn't send them with you. But oftentimes the tops of pies are brushed with a mixture of milk and egg. This kind of makes them brown nicely. So these will cook just fine, but you'll notice when we take them out in just a minute that they won't darken very much because they don't have enough to catch on top. You can mix one whole egg with a fair bit of milk, maybe an equal amount of milk. Mix it up really well and then lightly brush that mixture on top of your pastries. And then if you want, you can sprinkle a little bit of extra sugar on top of that, and that'll make it really pretty. But these will taste delicious and just fine when they come out of the oven, even without a kind of topping mixture. So we're going to pop these in the oven. I tend to cook them for about 20 minutes. But basically, you just want your pie dough to be done. The filling is already cooked. It's just jelly. So as long as the pie dough is at a texture that you think is good and it doesn't smell burnt, then you're good to go. So we'll come back when these are done. And here are our final baked hand pies. So these they were in the oven for about 18 minutes, 19 minutes for me. And then they have been resting to cool for about 15 additional minutes. So they're probably like cool enough to eat now, but you do need to be careful with the jelly-filled pies because the fillings get really, really hot. But yeah, that is how you make homemade hand pies. If y'all have any questions, drop them in the comments, and the full recipe and instruction list is also linked in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day. Bye!